First story, by Sarah Mitchell. I moved to a remote cabin in the dense forests of northern Wisconsin to escape the chaos of city life. Surrounded by towering pine trees, I felt a sense of serenity and isolation that I craved. But that tranquility would soon be shattered by a series of unsettling events that would leave me questioning my decision to live alone in this secluded haven. It all began one chilly autumn evening. I was cozied up by the fireplace, reading a book, when I heard a faint rustling sound outside. I dismissed it as the wind rustling through the leaves and continued reading. But the noise persisted, growing louder and more distinct. I peered out of the window, my breath catching in my throat. A figure stood among the trees, partially concealed by the shadows. The stranger's face was hidden beneath a hood, and their movements were deliberate, as if they were aware of my watchful eyes. My heart raced as I watched them step closer to my cabin. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my trembling fingers barely able to type in the numbers. The operator assured me that help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. The minutes felt like hours as I watched the intruder move closer, their intent unclear. Then, the stalker did something that sent shivers down my spine. They began to circle the cabin, moving methodically and deliberately. It was as if they were studying the building, seeking weaknesses. I realized with horror that they were trying to find a way in. The police arrived just in time, their sirens and flashing lights sending the stalker fleeing into the woods. They assured me that they would conduct a thorough search of the area, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched even after they left. That night, I slept fitfully, clutching a kitchen knife beneath my pillow. Over the following weeks, I installed security cameras around the cabin and reinforced the doors and windows. But the sense of unease persisted. I found strange markings etched into the trees surrounding my property, symbols that seemed ancient and sinister. And every so often, I would catch glimpses of the hooded figure in the woods, always just out of reach. I began to lose sleep, my nerves frayed by the constant fear of the unknown. I couldn't focus on anything else, and my friends and family grew concerned for my well-being. They urged me to leave the cabin and seek safety elsewhere, but something inside me refused to back down. I was determined to uncover the identity of my tormentor. One fateful night, I decided to confront the stalker head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a feeling of grim determination, I ventured into the woods, following the eerie symbols that had been carved into the trees. It was a moonless night, and the forest seemed to close in around me as I ventured deeper into the darkness. I finally came upon a clearing, and there, standing amidst a circle of gnarled trees, was the hooded figure. They turned to face me, their eyes hidden in the shadows of their hood. I demanded to know why they had been tormenting me, but they remained silent, their presence suffocating. With a sudden burst of courage, I reached out and grabbed the hood, pulling it back to reveal their face. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was my own reflection staring back at me in a cracked mirror, nestled among the trees. I stumbled back in shock, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. The forest seemed to close in around me, and I realized with horror that I had become the very thing I had feared. The isolation and paranoia had warped my mind, turning me into my own worst enemy. I fled the cabin that night, leaving behind the haunting memories of that isolated wilderness. The forest had revealed the darkest corners of my own psyche, and I knew that I could never return. Second story, by Mark Johnson. I always considered myself street smart, but no amount of city savvy could have prepared me for the nightmare that unfolded in my own apartment. It all began with a series of strange occurrences that, at first, I chalked up to coincidence. Muffled footsteps in the hallway outside my door, whispered voices in the dead of night, and the constant feeling of being watched. I lived alone in a small, run-down apartment building in the heart of Brooklyn, and I had grown used to the quirks of city living. But this was different. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from my window. My heart pounded as I cautiously approached it, pulling back the curtain to reveal a haunting sight. A faceless figure stood on the fire escape just outside my window, a mask concealing their identity. They wore a long, tattered coat that rustled in the wind. Frozen in fear, I watched as they raised a gloved hand and traced a message on the window. It read, "I see you." My blood ran cold as I backed away from the window, realizing that I was being targeted by a relentless stalker. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the stalker had vanished into the night. They assured me they would patrol the area and investigate, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. I stayed up all night, clutching a baseball bat, my eyes never leaving the window. Days turned into weeks, and the torment continued. The stalker left eerie messages on my doorstep, cryptic notes that hinted at a deep obsession. I couldn't go to work without feeling their eyes on me, and I became increasingly paranoid about every person I passed on the street. One evening, as I was returning home from work, I received a chilling text message. It contained a photo of me taken from behind, standing in front of my apartment building. The message read, "You can't hide." I felt a surge of panic as I realized that the stalker was not only watching me but also following my every move. Terrified for my safety, I decided to install security cameras inside and outside my apartment. I also reached out to a private investigator, hoping they could help me unmask my tormentor. But as the days turned into months, the stalker continued to evade capture, leaving me in a perpetual state of fear. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard the familiar tapping on my window. I rushed to the curtain and pulled it back, expecting to see the faceless figure on the fire escape. But this time, there was something different. The stalker was inside my apartment. I screamed in terror as I saw them standing at the foot of my bed, their masks still concealing their face. They raised a gloved hand and beckoned me to come closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my phone, ready to dial 911. But before I could make the call, the stalker spoke for the first time, their voice a sinister whisper. They said, "I've always been here, watching. You can never escape me." With those chilling words, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving me paralyzed with fear. I moved out of that apartment the next day, leaving behind the nightmare that had consumed my life. The police continued to investigate, but the stalker remained elusive, their true identity hidden in the shadows. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that they are still out there, waiting and watching, ready to strike again. Third story, by Emily Williams. My husband, John, and I thought we had found the perfect suburban neighborhood to raise our 2 young children. The streets were lined with picturesque houses, and the sense of community was strong. But our idyllic life was about to be shattered by an unseen menace that would turn our dream home into a nightmare. It started innocently enough. A few strange phone calls with heavy breathing on the other end, mysterious letters with no return address, and unsettling gifts left on our doorstep. At first, we dismissed it as a harmless prank, but as the weeks went by, the harassment escalated. One night, as I was putting our kids to bed, I heard a loud crash coming from the living room. I rushed downstairs to find a shattered window and a rock on the floor with a chilling message tied to it. It read, "We're always watching." Terrified, we called the police, who promised to increase patrols in our area. But despite their efforts, the stalker continued to torment us. They would leave strange symbols painted on our front door, and we would find our belongings rearranged or missing. The sense of dread in our own home became overwhelming. We couldn't sleep at night, constantly checking the locks and peering out the windows. Our children became frightened and anxious, their once happy home now filled with fear. One evening, as John was working late, I heard a noise in the backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, my heart pounding. There, in the darkness, I saw a figure lurking near the bushes. They wore a hood and a mask, their eyes fixed on me. I screamed and ran back inside, locking the door behind me. The police arrived quickly, but once again, the stalker had vanished. They assured us they were doing everything they could to catch the culprit, but the sense of helplessness was overwhelming. Desperate for answers, we decided to hire a private investigator. He uncovered a trail of breadcrumbs that led to a disgruntled neighbor who had a grudge against our family for reasons unknown. The neighbor denied any involvement, but the evidence was damning. As the investigation continued, the harassment escalated to a dangerous level. We would find threatening notes inside our home, and our car tires were slashed multiple times. We lived in constant fear, wondering when the stalker would strike next. One night, as we were putting our children to bed, we heard a crash coming from the kitchen. We rushed downstairs to find the back door wide open, and the stalker standing just outside, bathed in the moonlight. They lunged at us, but we managed to slam the door shut and call the police. This time, they caught the stalker in the act. It was indeed our neighbor, driven by a twisted obsession that had spiraled out of control. As they were taken away in handcuffs, their eyes locked onto ours with a chilling intensity. We moved away from that neighborhood, seeking a fresh start in a new town. But the scars from our ordeal would never fully heal. The experience taught us that danger can lurk even in the most unsuspecting places, and that the sanctuary of our own home could be violated by a relentless stalker. Fourth story, by James Reynolds. College life had always been filled with excitement and new experiences for me, but my sophomore year would turn into a nightmare that I could never have imagined. It all began with a series of unsettling incidents that left me feeling uneasy on my own campus. Strange notes started appearing in my mailbox, each one more disturbing than the last. They contained cryptic messages that hinted at a deep obsession, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One night, as I was studying late in the library, I noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. They wore a hood and a mask, their eyes fixed on me. I quickly gathered my belongings and left, my heart pounding. But as I stepped outside, I realized that the stalker was following me. I hurried back to my dorm, locked the door, and called the campus security. They promised to increase patrols and investigate the matter, but the sense of fear and paranoia continued to gnaw at me. I started avoiding certain places on campus, and I couldn't focus on my studies. The stalker's actions escalated. They would leave unsettling messages written in chalk on the sidewalks, always appearing when I least expected it. They knew my class schedule, my routines, and it felt like they were always one step ahead. I confided in my friends and roommates, and they urged me to be vigilant and stay safe. But the constant fear began to take a toll on my mental health. I couldn't sleep at night, and every noise outside my window sent me into a panic. One evening, as I was returning to my dorm after a late-night study session, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see the stalker, their mask concealing their face, standing just a few feet away. They lunged at me, and I screamed for help. Fortunately, a security guard appeared just in time, and the stalker fled into the darkness. The campus police launched a full-scale investigation, but the stalker remained elusive, their true identity hidden. I began to receive threatening messages on my phone, each one more terrifying than the last. The stalkers seemed to revel in the fear they had instilled in me, taunting me with their twisted words. Unable to bear the constant terror any longer, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began documenting every incident, gathering evidence that I hoped would lead to the stalker's capture. I installed security cameras in my dorm room and even started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. One night, as I was reviewing the footage from my security cameras, I saw a chilling image. The stalker had been inside my room while I slept, watching me. I called the police immediately, and they arrived to collect the evidence. With the newfound evidence, the police were able to trace the stalker to a fellow student who had become obsessed with me. They were arrested and charged with stalking and harassment, and I finally felt a sense of relief that the nightmare was over. But the scars from that terrifying ordeal would never fully heal. College, once a place of excitement and learning, had become a place of fear and paranoia. I had learned the hard way that even the most seemingly safe environments could harbor danger, and that a relentless stalker could turn your life into a living nightmare. Fifth Story, by Lisa Turner. My family and I had been eagerly anticipating our vacation to a secluded cabin nestled in the rugged mountains of Colorado. It was meant to be a peaceful escape from the chaos of everyday life, but it would soon become a harrowing ordeal that none of us could forget. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest neighbor or cell phone signal. It was the perfect retreat for a family seeking solitude and adventure. Little did we know that our adventure would take a dark and terrifying turn. It all began on the second night of our stay. As we were gathered around the fireplace, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, we heard a rustling sound coming from outside. We dismissed it as the wind rustling through the trees, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more distinct. My husband, Mark, decided to investigate, grabbing a flashlight and stepping out onto the cabin's porch. He scanned the surrounding woods, but the darkness offered no clues. As he was about to return inside, he caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure among the trees. He called out, asking who was there, but there was no response. The figure remained hidden in the darkness, their presence suffocating. Mark hurried back inside, his face pale with fear, and locked all the doors and windows. We tried to reassure ourselves that it was probably just a curious animal, but the feeling of unease lingered. That night, we slept fitfully, our ears straining for any unusual sounds. The following day, we decided to go for a hike in the surrounding mountains, hoping to shake off the unease that had settled over us. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, we began to notice strange symbols etched into the trees and rocks along the trail. The symbols seemed ancient and sinister, and they left us with a deep sense of unease. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We cut our hike short and returned to the cabin, our nerves on edge. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, we heard a loud crash coming from the upstairs bedroom. Mark rushed upstairs, and we followed closely behind. The window in the bedroom had been shattered, and a chilling message was scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. It read, "Leave this place." Terrified, we called the local authorities, but they were hours away, given the remote location of the cabin. We decided to gather our belongings and leave, but as we were packing, we heard footsteps outside the cabin. We huddled together in the living room, clutching whatever makeshift weapons we could find. The footsteps grew closer, and we could hear the intruder trying to force their way inside. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming, and we knew that we had to defend ourselves. With a final, desperate push, the intruder managed to break through the front door. They stepped inside, their face concealed by a mask, and we realized with horror that they were armed. It was a tense standoff, our family against this unknown assailant. But just as the situation seemed dire, the local authorities arrived, their sirens and flashing lights sending the intruder fleeing into the woods. They were apprehended shortly afterward, their identity shocking us all. It was a reclusive hermit who had been living in the wilderness for years. He had become obsessed with our family's presence in the area, believing that we were intruders encroaching on his territory. He had been leaving the symbols and messages as warnings, and his erratic behavior had escalated to violence. Our vacation had turned into a nightmare, and the sense of safety we had once felt was shattered. We returned home, forever haunted by the memory of the remote cabin in the mountains and the relentless stalker who had turned our family's dream vacation into a terrifying ordeal. These stories remind us that the real horrors of life often stem from the actions of individuals, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the thin line between safety and danger. In a world where the unknown can lurk around any corner, it's essential to stay vigilant and prepared for the unexpected. Thank you for watching whole video. Check this video you see on the screen, it's one of my favorite. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that like to support my free and daily content for you. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment and tell me what story got you chills.